I work for the Nunavut Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, and it's a group of organizations that has come together to deal with the issue of poverty together in recognition that such a complex issue, you need to have multiple perspectives and multiple partners. And so I'm actually a government employee. I work for the Anti-Poverty Secretariat, which is housed in the Department of Economic Development and Transportation. However, I feel my role is more to act as a diplomat and between the discourse between community groups and government. And we're in the last stages of our process, which has been a public engagement process to create an action plan to reduce poverty in Nunavut. And that action plan will be coming out at a summit we're going to be hosting next week. So I'm going to keep this very brief. You can go on to the next slide. But I'd just like to emphasize, I'm a bureaucrat, so I'm going to talk about process, but I really think that the process here is very important. So how do we go about reducing poverty? The direction we received was from our government document, Tamapta, which has 3 basic principles and rules to reduce poverty. First, you cannot let government own the poverty problem because it's too complex for government to solve alone. Secondly, everyone is involved in the solution. You have to work collaboratively, holistically, and maximize participation. And finally, Nunavut needs support in their efforts to reduce poverty. We can't be doing things for people, but we have to help people do things for themselves, and that's kind of our mantra throughout the process. And we've been using an asset-based approach. So it's a very difficult issue to talk about, especially at the community level. Lots of tough issues to get through, and we found that we weren't getting anywhere talking about these issues from what we lacked. So we tried to focus on what we had in our communities, and that would be our foundation, our base to launch us into solutions for poverty. You can go on. So our process has 4 stages. The first stage was community dialogues, and we started our community dialogues in the new year. And we had kind of meetings in every community, and it was up to community volunteers to decide how exactly those meetings were going to play out. Then we moved into the regional roundtables, which were more policy-oriented, and we started to look for solutions to some of the issues and ideas that were raised in the first stage. And now we're moving, we're just almost at the summit, and we produced a report for each region from stage 2 that talked about what sorts of actions could we take to reduce poverty and who could be involved. It wasn't just government who could solve the poverty issue. So that's where we're at now, and then very importantly, and what we've heard from these other panelists is that it won't end after the summit. We have to set up a very well thought out monitoring and evaluation scheme so that we can make sure that what we've promised to do as a group we can stick with, and not just for 5 years, but 10 years, 15 years. It's going to take a while. So just to talk a little bit about the community dialogues, we had 521 participants, 36 volunteer facilitators, and we had public dialogues in 21 of our 25 communities. And the significant part of this public engagement was that we were trying to get away from the traditional consultation method. People in Nunavut are sick and tired of being consulted. They say they're being consulted to death, and you can't engage with people and allow them to be part of the decision-making process if you consult. So public engagement is more, it's often referred to as the reverse or the opposite of consultation. And we found it's been a very effective way to bring people on and to include other groups in the decision-making process. And our community dialogues were started, it was a partnership. The Nunavut Literacy Council came on and agreed to help us do a toolkit, create this toolkit, which it was the trainer's model, and we were going to go in and go to every region and train community members to run their own dialogues and talk about poverty in a way that they wanted to. It was a toolkit because we just wanted to provide them with tools. We didn't want to prescribe or tell them exactly how to run their meetings. So there were town hall meetings, there were photo voice workshops, there were focus groups, I mean, you name it. But the emphasis was on community and community run and community owned. So from there we went on to the regional roundtables, and here, like I mentioned earlier, was more kind of policy-oriented discussions, trying to look, going towards more of a solution to the issues that were raised in the first stage. And these were co-chaired by a minister from government and the Vice President, Jack Anouak of NTI, who are our co-sponsors in this whole project. And it was very interesting at these roundtables because they were, you know, for the first time that we've seen with trying to roll out this strategy, was that there were ministers sitting next to, you know, people who had lived experience in poverty with frontline workers, all discussing issues at small tables. We used the World Cafe model, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, but it really allowed people to move around and talk in small groups, because when you're talking about an issue like poverty, we really found that the more effective discussions came after we created a space where people felt comfortable really expressing their views on the issue and trying to create a positive space to move forward and to work towards solutions. And I'll also mention that George Dunkley, who's here, was involved in the project, and he was a co-facilitator in the community dialogues in Rankin Inlet. So, emerging out of this process were 5 predominant themes, and they came out of the process organically. We had all our facilitators mail back to Iqaluit, where I work, mail back their flip charts or tape recordings or whatever they had from their meetings, and we sifted through all this information and took months, and we found that these were the predominant themes that came out, these 5 action themes to reduce poverty. And interestingly enough, healing and well-being was predominant, like the #1 issue that came out time and time again. People need a place to heal, and it affects so many of the other action themes. You know, if you don't start that healing process, you're not able to enter the workforce. You can't talk about economic development until you've addressed those issues. Now, I'm not saying you focus just on healing and well-being, but until you make that your primary concern, you're going to have a lot of trouble with the others. So the others would be education, training and skills development, food security and access to country foods, which I'm very interested and grateful that we had some presentations earlier today about that, housing and income support and how the two systems are so interconnected, and then community and economic development. So both community level initiatives, and this is where the social economy plays such a significant role, but also economic development in the pure sense, and potentially, you know, what does the business community have to do with poverty reduction? Skip all this. And then, very interestingly, after we completed stage 2 of the process, a 6th theme emerged, and it came from all the discussions we had at our regional roundtables, where really we need to change the way we work together. We need a mechanism to bring people together to discuss these issues and to work collaboratively. Many agencies, and certainly most government departments, are already taking action to reduce poverty, each in their own separate way. And these efforts must continue to be extended, but they'll never be sufficient, mostly because they deal primarily with symptoms and they don't address the root causes of poverty. So the conditions that produce poverty won't change until these underlying causes are exposed and, in a sense, healed. So we were told in the community dialogues and the regional roundtables that the root causes lie in this distinct difference between Inuit forms of governance and the model of governance that we use today, the Euro-Canadian model. And as these two systems came together with the creation of our modern settlements, they were not fully reconciled. And so it is difficult for us to make progress on social and cultural issues when this reconciliation has not been completed. So we're looking for more truthful dialogue and we need to address kind of the massive social changes that have occurred since colonization and just the rapid social change that has come about. And for this we need genuine collaboration, because it returns people to the process of making decisions for themselves. And this is the way to self-reliance, and it's a key to healing and reducing poverty. So, on the last slide, I believe, second last slide actually, the summit is next week. It starts Monday. I'm flying back tomorrow, and we're going to be working hard, kind of solidifying all the ideas that we've been working hard to deal with over the past few months, and shop around different players in and outside government who can play a role. But we see 4 potential elements to deal with, to address the issue of poverty. First, we need actions that we can take immediately. These are policy changes predominantly, extending breakfast programs, or changing, allowing allowable income from the income support system, raising the threshold for that. These are small things, but they can make a difference, especially in the short term. And then figuring out projects that different groups can work on together. One example, and this is not official yet, but we're trying to establish a food security coalition for Nunavut, where people, academics, and government and Inuit organizations have a place to go to discuss these issues. Then we need a collaborative structure between government and Inuit organizations. This relationship in Nunavut has been broken, and we need a place to work on social and cultural issues together, so we're proposing an Article 32 working group. And we also need to support that relationship at the community level with the regional Inuit associations and our government employees that work in communities, so strengthening interagency groups there. Then, and this is probably one of the more complicated initiatives, but we need, and I'm so glad to hear so many people who work at the ground level today talk about this. We need structures, we need to support structures at the community level, and we need a mechanism to allow them to have access to the center very quickly. So I won't get into the details of that, but basically we're looking to strengthen the bottom-up approach, but also recognizing that we need some initiatives to come from the center and work their way down. And then finally, in Nunavut, poverty hasn't existed for just a couple of years, and we're not going to get out of poverty in just a couple of years. It's going back to those short-term solutions. We don't want to rely just on the government of the day to have all the interests of that party vested in an action plan and then have it changed with the change of government. So we're going to propose legislation that will enshrine poverty reduction in law. And so it'll make poverty reduction a policy of the state and not a policy of the government of the day. We're going to try. So that's where we're at, and we've had definite support from government and NTI, and I work very closely with a few colleagues at NTI. It's been a positive working environment, but it's not easy. We're doing things a way that government is not used to, and I speak like I'm not even in government, but I'm happy to say that our leadership has been quite supportive, but I'm under no illusion that it's going to be an easy road after the summit when promises are made. That's fine. I'm more concerned about what happens after, and to build on our momentum and keep it going. And we'll see what happens when we come out of the summit, and if we can continue the support. But take-home messages are we have to start working collaboratively on these programs and processes, and we need a mechanism to do that. So that's where we're going with this. Thank you.